This is Media Week.
Hello and welcome to the program. Ahead, can 10 cash in on its best ratings in years? Shop 2 drop saved from the axe, Just, and will internet-delivered TV really eclipse traditional TV viewing in the coming year? But first, the out-of-home industry continues to see consistent growth despite the tough ad markets. Latest data from the Outdoor Media Association shows revenue was up 9% in the second quarter in the same period last year. The industry has long campaigned to take a bigger share of the total advertising pool, and it now has a new chairman spearheading the cause. Steve O'Connor recently took over as chairman of the Outdoor Media Association. He's also CEO of JCDecaux. He joins us now alongside our co-host James Manning, editor and publisher of Media Week in the studio. Thanks for joining us today, Steve.
Thanks, Ingrid. Nice to be here.
So, obviously we've seen some huge digital expansion in the previous 6 months, but what do you see as, I guess, the key challenges for the sector coming?
I think most of the challenges sit around the regulatory area, and I suppose you can break that up into two distinct sections. One is the planning side of things, to make sure that the planning requirements and schemes that both the state government and the local governments administer can keep up with the opportunities that the sector is presenting. On the other side, there is probably the content regulation side of things. It's something that we've been challenged in a couple of instances lately to make sure that we are doing the right thing and maintaining the appropriate community expectations in terms of the content that we're displaying on our medium. And I'm pleased to say in both cases that we've been challenged in that place. We've managed to convince them that we're being responsible and we've got the right processes in place to do that. But I have to say that I think that there's more positive things on the side of the ledger than there is challenges, which is a nice place to be.
Steve, just on that planning, I mean, I guess you and your members would like to have more outdoor sites, but are you also wary of clutter and having too much, which will, detract from maybe some of the communications?
Most definitely. I think that we're not about proliferating the streetscape with advertising signage. That's certainly not the case, and I think that we've struck a pretty good balance now with how many signs that we've actually got in the market. I think the planning challenges sit more around the ability for us to upgrade those signs and improve them, and I think probably what you would see that there might be some trade-off between rationalising some signs for the development of others. So I think it's more around the improvement of existing locations and capitalising on those primary locations.
Rather than having more.
More than having more. Exactly.
Yeah.
Is it hard, though, balancing that investment needed to convert the sites?
Well, it is. It's most of the way that our contracts work is you tend to tip the investment into the front end of the contract. Obviously, it gives you a longer term to be able to pay that back. So it depends on where you are in that contract cycle as to whether or not you've got a capacity to invest or not. So and at the same time, the vast majority of the revenue is still written from our analogue product or the paper product as it's known. So we need to make sure that we're not selling all the shiny new stuff and forgetting the old, because the old stuff still works particularly well.
Yeah.
And does the advertiser, does it cost much more, or do you sort of budget it over a long period of time to get the return, or?
We are obviously needing to charge more for the advertising to justify the investment. I don't think that I think there's a reasonable parity between perhaps analogue and digital. Mm-hmm. I think that probably hasn't settled yet. We need to understand where what the price opportunities are with that format. So yeah, it's a bit of a way to run yet.
Yeah.
How much revenue growth are you forecasting for the outdoor sector? Could it crack 600 million?
Yeah, well, I don't think it will this year, but I think it certainly will this year. I mean, we've had over the last 5 years a compound average growth rate of some 36%, in contrast to all advertising, which sits around 14%. So we've had a good run. I think that this year, and Pricewaterhouse has got outdoor forecast over and above perhaps most other traditional media anyway. And I'd anticipate that we'll grow this year around about 5 to 6%. Our first half growth rate this year has been 5.5%. And I think that probably will run through for the rest of the year. So if we can maintain that into 2015, that $600 million mark will be met.
So you mentioned that PwC, I think they have you up about 3%, give or take, every year for the next 5 years. Yep. I noticed they have you at about 665 million, though. Do they count in something else that you guys don't?
I think that they may be sourcing the Standard Media Index revenues from major agencies, and they do count production in their numbers. The Outdoor Media Association, of which we probably represent 85% of the industry, accounts only net media revenue. So, but that does include direct revenue as well as agency revenue, and SMI doesn't.
What's driving the strong growth though in outdoor?
I think there's a whole lot of different things. I think that as an industry, we are fundamentally in a really, really good place because our audiences are growing. We don't have the sort of structural issues that other media channels do where they're losing audience. And so, for example, according to Move, which is our audience measurement system, our audience grew by 3% in 2014 on 2013. So there's that, and that's the fundamental thing. We've obviously got new technologies doing that as well. And I think what you'll see in the future, there's this increased urbanisation, high consumer expectation, new technologies sort of converge to create this great opportunity for those sort of more innovative and smart outdoor advertising companies who can genuinely provide infrastructure with amenity to it. They'll be able to sell to cities, and because the city budgets are under pressure, rate increases aren't as they would like them to be. So for those types of companies who can provide those sort of solutions and deliver those improved services to inhabitants, I think we'll be in a great space to continue to grow their business ongoing. And when you look at some of the specific things within the technology, obviously digital is growing the sector at a strong rate. I think we're all been very surprised about what the revenues are that have been contributed by digital. I think, for example, in the UK this year they're expecting it to tip around about 30% of total outdoor revenues being digitally generated, and here it's around about 14%. So I think there's some good headway to go.
It's a pure advertising play too. I mean, you don't have to worry about any pesky content, do you, that the audience could maybe get somewhere else? Or
That's right, and it's a lot of the content that is being run is consumer generated in some cases, so that's a cheap source of content.
Sure, yeah.
You mentioned before you had some problems, well, with Brisbane particularly in terms of content regulation. What's the sort of update there?
Oh, well, we've been through a process with the state government there to impress upon them how that we are being responsible in the way that we're managing content, and that hasn't played out fully yet, but we expect that will be a sensible outcome. We don't expect that there'll be any more sort of forced regulation on the sector. There may be some requirements for them to comply with the ASB's rulings, which we would certainly endorse.
And there's a bit of regulation about your digital too, regarding moving images and beside roadways and stuff like that. Is that?
Yeah, I don't think any of us are really hell bent on trying to stream video, certainly in roadside environments. That would be silly. I think we would like to see at some point in time limited animation take place. I think.
So regulations now between how quickly you can roll over the images and stuff.
Rotating the copy as opposed to actually what you can do within the actual ad itself.
Right.
So,
You probably wouldn't want to do it online streaming anyway because it wouldn't be very effective.
No, that's right. Exactly. You can't
get people stopping.
That's right. So that's not going to happen.
Your other hat is CEO of JCDecaux. So let's talk a bit about that. What are the specialisations of that business?
Well, globally, we're the largest outdoor advertising company, and we are market leaders in the street furniture sector and the transport sector, and sort of number 2 in billboards. But in Australia, we've sort of stuck to our knitting, which is more concentrating on street furniture and also transport. So we've got a number of contracts on the eastern seaboard of Australia where we supply a range of different infrastructure in return for advertising rights. For example, in Brisbane, we've got a public bike scheme, which is advertising funded. In the City of Sydney, we've got bus shelters through to automatic public toilets, through to retail kiosks. So there's a broad range of infrastructure there. And also with transport contracts as well. We've got contracts with Queensland Rail, for example, Melbourne Rail Network, etc., to supplement the roadside.
Are they? I mean, you see your little JCDecaux vans in Hyde Park, whatever, going in and cleaning and changing the signage when it's necessary. Have you sort of rolled that out, or is there still room for those to grow? And
we as a business have focused, made a very deliberate. Deliberate intention of focusing on delivering advertisers higher value audiences. So that tends to mean that we're focusing on sort of inner urban, inner metro advertising opportunities. So councils and those sort of and transport networks, etc., that are domiciled in those areas. So I think probably where we are at the moment, we feel pretty comfortable about that. Obviously, we'll be looking at opportunities as they present themselves over time. But at the moment, I think we've got a good niche in the market, and we could expect to sort of leverage that a bit harder. Yeah.
So what sectors are the biggest sort of users of outdoor, and particularly for street furniture?
I think across the outdoor industry as a whole, it's FMCG, retail and communications, I think are the 3 biggest categories for the sector. And within JCDecaux specifically, it's a little bit of a change there. We're finance, entertainment and FMCG is our product. And that sort of reflects probably the higher value audience that we deliver, or we index higher against the average.
And do the advertisers, they look for calls to action, like motivating you to go out and buy, or is there more a branding, a long-term effect they're looking for?
I think it's one of the advantages of digital is that we're now able to relay more information about products and services, and that is certainly changing the advertisers' perception about how we can be used. And I think ultimately the holy grail is to be able to facilitate transactions at locations, and that's something I think sure will happen in time as the technology advances.
All right, Steve O'Connor, thanks so much for joining us today on the show. We'll have to leave it there.
Thank you.
Time for a quick break, but coming up on Media Week, the digital tipping point is here. All the details of Deloitte's Media Consumer Survey up next.